It was Monday, so there was a meeting that night, and it was my turn to facilitate. Hundreds in the room, as usual. On the agenda that night was a zap against Cardinal O'Connor, quoted in the Times that day, referring to the immorality of condoms. Roberto stood up to announce a march, as soon as the meeting adjourned, to the Catholic Archdiocese office on Christopher Street. He held up the fact sheet, guerrilla Xeroxed that afternoon at someone's office, and filled with statistics. How many New Yorkers were infected? How many had died? How many of those lives might have been saved by condoms? In big letters, we demand the Catholic Church retract O'Connor's statements and admit that condoms save lives. That such a retraction was highly unlikely didn't matter. The very unlikelihood of the demand gave us purpose. From the front of the room, I asked Roberto where the zap would start. He pointed to the door. Okay, I announced to the group, front corner if you want to zap the Archdiocese. I saw Darren waving from the back, and I called on him. The media committee, he explained, had already tipped off its contacts. It was a slow news night. We'd probably get live coverage on tonight's broadcasts. Let's move through the agenda, I said, and then after that, I'm walking to the front corner. This one's a no-brainer, people. What else are you going to do after the meeting? Go home and watch the rest of us on the news? Come on, who's joining me? Hands flew into the air. I caught Darren's eye, saw the surprise on his face. He knew I'd always considered it my responsibility as facilitator to be a cool, neutral head in a room that ran hot and passionate. But tonight I was all adrenaline. We left the community center and poured onto 7th Avenue, stopping traffic. An orchestra of car horns blared behind us. Normally, I preferred our larger actions where everything was choreographed in advance. The cops were tipped off to our intentions, and those planning to be arrested had gone through civil disobedience training. Zaps never had enough marshals for crowd control or enough designated legal observers. When things went wrong, they sometimes went very wrong. I didn't care that night. I was among the group leading one chant, "Hey, hey, ho, ho, Cardinal O'Connor has got to go." And then another, "They say don't fuck. We say fuck you." Someone had the bullhorn, but we didn't need it. Our shouting bounced off the buildings like thunder. We moved on to Christopher Street toward the river, the gayest part of downtown, where for some reason the Archdiocese maintained an office next to an old stone church. We flanked the buildings, which were fronted by a wrought iron fence 6 feet high. The police caught up to us but hung back, waiting to see what would happen, radioing for backup. It was that crucial moment when a demonstration could go in any direction, organize into order or splinter into chaos. I heard voices near me beginning to chant, "Take the fence, take the fence." Someone nimble, moving fast enough, could be up and over and onto the steps of the church before the police could stop him. And I thought, not him, me. I turned to Roberto. "I'm going over," I said. I slid to the front, gripped the bars, and started to hoist myself up. I immediately felt hands beneath me, pushing upward, and I clawed higher, found my grip, and flung myself across. I felt a point of iron tear into my palm, but I was already tumbling to the other side. My feet skidded, but I kept my balance, and a cheer swelled up from the street. Now Roberto was climbing over the fence too, and then another guy, and then 2 women, Hillary and someone I didn't know. We raised our hands triumphantly. I could see the men in blue moving in from the periphery. The crowd booed them, a bass vibration intermingling with the cheers and the chants. Soon it was pure din. Through the iron bars, people handed us fact sheets. We carried them up the steps, then realized we had no way to fasten them. "Tape!" I shouted. "Tape! Tape! Anyone have tape?" Amy, one of the most organized dykes in the group, was at the fence, rifling through her knapsack. "Here," she said, and magically produced a cardboard square of thumbtacks. We passed them out, struggling to pin to the hard wooden doors of the church as many fact sheets as we could, trying to build something the size of a small billboard. I turned to the crowd and raised my fists. The din coalesced into a single roar. There were so many of them. Act up, fight back, fight AIDS. And then, unexpectedly, there were cops climbing over the fence, too, swift and agile, possibly the most in-shape cops in Manhattan. I just had enough time to notice that they had removed their badges, and then one of them pushed my face against the papered-over doors. He yanked back my arms. I felt the snap of plastic cuffs, hard edges sharp on my skin. My injured hand throbbed. I saw Roberto get cuffed, and then Heidi and her friend. The last guy, a skinny boy with dark eyes and floppy bangs, was shouting back at the cops. One of them pulled out a nightstick and rammed it into his ribs. He went down. The noise reached a brutal crescendo. I heard a voice saying we were under arrest, but there was nowhere to go, so we were held in place as the crowd hissed, "Shame, shame, shame, shame." I saw Darren leading a news camera through the mob. The reporter shouted questions, swallowed by the noise. At last, a harried old man from the church was escorted in with a key to unlock the gate. We were pushed out toward a waiting police van. "Where are you taking us?" I demanded, but got no reply. People were yelling, "Show us your badges," and "Let them go." Compared to the madness of this moment, my last arrest in Albany had been as organized as a prom. 8 of us, cuffed, were thrown into the windowless van, the 5 who had climbed the fence, and the 3 others nabbed from the crowd. Last into the van was the boy who'd been clubbed, shouting that he was in pain. "Shame, shame, shame," we chorused, out of sync with the same chant from outside. Then the door was slammed, and our voices reverberated in the dark. The deflated stillness was punctuated by the whoosh of tires as the vehicle crept away. Would they put us through central booking, which would mean a night in the Tombs, where arrestees from all over the city were held en masse? Would they separate the women or hold us as a unit? Would act-up lawyers show up? And would we even know it if they did? I started to worry that there could be real charges, that the church might want to make a point of us. But then, next to me, I could make out Roberto, his face readably euphoric even in the dim light. "That was incredible," he said. "I wish we could see it on the news." They took us to some numbered precinct on the Lower East Side, led the women to one cell, and put the 6 guys in another, where a couple of bums sprawled in the corner, one stirring long enough to say, "Shut up, I'm sleeping." We were shouting questions to the police, but they slipped away from sight and ignored us for a long time. I had to pee. I was thirsty. My hand where I'd cut it was a streak of dried blood threatening to split open again. "Now the church really has blood on its hands," Roberto joked. "It's called a stigmata," I said. "Calm down, Mother Teresa," he said. Brian, the boy who'd been hit, lifted his shirt and showed us where his ribs had taken the impact of the nightstick, the skin already blooming into a wide red splotch that would absolutely bruise. The cell felt colder and drearier the longer we were there, and we huddled together to keep warm, arms and legs entwined. Brian shouted, "I need medical attention," and the guy in the corner muttered, "You're not the only one, faggot," which caused an eruption. Skinny, girly Brian got in the guy's face, and the guy, dressed in rags and scabbed across his skin, spat at Brian's feet. A cop appeared through the bars and, like a stock character from an old movie, commanded, "Break it up, break it up." We were marched out at last, joined by the women. We had agreed in the van to give only names and addresses. They wanted to fingerprint us, said if we refused, we'd be held overnight. We looked at each other. Roberto said, "Who cares if they fingerprint us?" And I answered, "They'll send it to the FBI. And Hillary said, "I assume I already have a file." Then Brian spoke up, "I want to go to the emergency room." The officer said, "If any one of you refuses, you all stay." An evil tactic and probably illegal, but it worked. I'd never been fingerprinted before. I watched the ink stain my fingertips as I made a set of marks next to my name. I felt the pressure of the record book under my skin. Our fact sheets have remained tacked to the church door only long enough to be cheered and photographed. It wasn't much on its own. But maybe our action got 2 minutes on the nightly news. Maybe the church would be forced to respond. Maybe a viewer, previously unmoved by AIDS, would stop to ask how the cardinal could justify a stance against disease prevention. You threw your little stone, and the pond rippled. If enough of you threw them, you'd alter the shape of the shoreline. And yet those 10 black smudges on the page for me were personal. I saw in them the end point to my day, which had begun with a series of no's and maybes and wait-and-sees. And then a chance arose, and I took it. I couldn't have known it would end at sunrise, walking out of a police precinct with ink on my fingers, a battered comrade needing an escort to the hospital. I couldn't have known. But I'd become the kind of person for whom a day could turn in this way. And now it was official. I'd crossed a line. We cross them all the time, these delineations between who one has been and who one is becoming. But rarely are they as clear as black on white. Thanks.